Hey guys, how's it going? Kripparrian here. This week's top 3 decks will feature the best decks in the game once again. I'm glad you guys have enjoyed this series. Make sure to check out the previous episodes. We are on week 3 of the Rastakhan's Rumble expansion, and today we're going to cover the absolute best decks in the game. And we are about 1 week from the last video and about 1 week from the huge nerfs, huge balance changes that we had. And there's going to be some pretty interesting stuff. We're going to learn some stuff about the metagame through the best decks, and I'm going to cover a decent number of the decks I actually covered last week, but these decks have changed a little bit, and the most important thing that people will soon realize is that even though the very best decks in the game haven't changed very much in terms of what they are, like for example, the best deck in the game is even Paladin, which I believe was in the top 3 in the very last week, in the very last video. But the decks that are not in the top 3 are really close to the top 3, and there are a lot of them. The divide between the very best decks in the game and those under them has narrowed significantly to where I imagine this top decks of the week list should feature new decks, maybe not every week, but certainly close to it. The statistics that I want to present to you guys today are just that. They are from Hearthstone Replay. They're from games that people have played in the thousands, and the sample size is that of ranks 5 to rank 1. So at Legend, yes, people play competitively, but a lot of people get to Legend, play joke decks, and it kind of skews the data a lot. Between ranks 5 and rank 1, people play the game to win. So these decks are not my opinion. These decks are just by the book, by the numbers, the best winning decks in the game this very day. So what are they? Number 1 is even Paladin. The deck is absolutely unchanged since last week, so I'm not going to cover it in great detail. If you want more information on even Paladin and you haven't played enough ladder to really see what it's about, it is a very good deck. It is a pretty expensive deck. As you can see, a large number of legendaries. It plays kind of like a mid-range style. It just has extremely high power level cards. I covered the deck in detail in the previous video if you want, but know that the other decks I'm going to cover today are within like 0.5% of win rate. So they're going to move up and down. In fact, even just from yesterday, even Paladin was like 3rd yesterday. So these are all very much the best decks in the game right now, and they are quite interchangeable. Second best deck in the game right now between ranks 5 and rank 1 in standard is Odd Paladin. It actually survived the nerf. It's unbelievable to me. This is the new list, however. It is a new list. It does include some new additions. Those that people might be familiar with, in fact, as these are kind of like the free-to-play additions that people have suggested to those that couldn't craft the old Odd Paladin list. The main significant difference is that a level up's exit going from 5 to 6 mana is not playable in Odd Paladin, and to replace it, the main new addition is Frostwolf Warlord. Frostwolf Warlord doesn't quite do the same thing. It doesn't give you that burst damage, but it is still a very high stat card on curve. You're just kind of cruising off of the power level of the card. You're cruising off of the power level of the archetype, and it is still very strong. Odd Paladin is an extremely strong deck. It's a tier 1 deck, in fact. Who would have thunk it? Still after those crazy big nerfs, it's still there, and I think it's there because there was no deck that was quite as aggressive as it, so it just fills that role still after the nerfs like no other deck. The new changes make it so it has a lot less burst damage, so it is less aggressive and it is more manageable. There are a number of classes that counter it, and Odd Paladin needs to be played a bit more carefully right now. Another new addition, again, not very new, kind of like side replacement to the old Prince Liam list, is Leroy. Because you're lacking the burst from not having level up, you really need to have Leroy in every single version of Odd Paladin right now, because you really gotta get that burst. In terms of mulligan choices, largely the same as last week. Corridor Creeper, just to eventually get that large body for 0. It's very easy to do because your buffed hero power gives 2 1/1s. Speaking of 2 1/1s, Lost in the Jungle, best 1-drop in your opening hand. You want to keep that if you see it. If you don't have it, you want to mulligan for it. Righteous Protector is up there. Righteous Protector is 3rd on the mulligan choices, just one of the best 1-drops. Odd Paladin, you want to get on the board, stay on the board, and just keep pushing for an advantage. Right now, though, you do need to be a bit more greedy for face damage because you do not have the burst that you once had. Bad matchups are actually pretty interesting. Again, there are a number of them. Last week when Odd Paladin was unnerfed, there was basically no bad matchups for Odd Paladin. This is different right now, and I think this is pretty healthy for the game. Quest Warrior actually crushes Odd Paladin, but it's not to be mistaken with Quest Odd Warrior. We're talking about Quest Odd and Even Warrior. It does the best against Odd Paladin. You need those even mana cost, 1 damage ping board clears, and without them it really struggles. So, Odd Quest Warrior actually is not that good against Odd Paladin, but Quest Warrior with all the clearing tools is very good against Odd Paladin. Control Priest is very good against Odd Paladin, and any kind of combo druids, there's a lot fewer right now though, are also very good against Odd Paladin. One thing to note is that Odd Paladin, yes, it's still a very good deck, but people don't know that right now. So Odd Paladin, even though it is the deck that has led the game in Constructed Forest for a really long time, the play rate of Odd Paladin is very far away from its performance. That is, almost nobody is playing it versus how good the deck is. The deck is really good still, and nobody is playing it. So, if you watch this video and you still have your Odd Paladin list, and for some reason you enjoy playing Odd Paladin on ladder, which I can't really personally understand, but if you want to win, it's a good time to play the deck because not a lot of people will be expecting it. And this will actually be featured in the next deck here. The third best deck in the game, but again, first one was Even Paladin, so we kind of skipped it, is the new Deathrattle Hunter. Deathrattle Hunter made the top 3 last week, and there are some new interesting additions. The main new addition is that we have Amani Warbear, and the second one is we have Undasta. Last week I mentioned that these additions were possible options for the Deathrattle Hunter, but I didn't see them as very strong options because they were just generally good against fairly aggressive decks, but Deathrattle Hunter is a deck that crushes control decks, crushes slow decks, crushes mid-range decks, and loses really badly against aggro decks. But aggro decks last week were a lot more aggressive because they generally included Odd Paladin as the primary one. So this week, with Odd Paladin being significantly slower, the best version of Deathrattle Hunter actually includes the Amani Warbear Undasta combo duo to actually deal with aggro, because aggro being a little bit slower means these tools actually kind of work right now. As a result, Deathrattle Hunter actually has a little bit of a better matchup curve than before and is a much more well-rounded deck post-nerf. Best choices for your mulligans are Devilsaur Egg, that's been the same. Carnivorous Cube is an interesting one. Again, it goes to show that a lot of people are playing slightly slower decks, which is no surprise why Deathrattle Hunter makes the top 3 once again, and is no surprise why the new Deathrattle Hunter has some anti-aggro tools, because it can afford to use them. It can afford to actually keep Carnivorous Cube in the mulligan and win most of the time. It's very interesting. Third on the mulligan is obviously Prince Keleseth. You'll never not want to mulligan Prince Keleseth if you're playing a Prince Keleseth deck. In terms of bad matchups, there are a few, but there are very few. So those very few include, the worst one is Odd Hunter, just crazy hyper all-in aggro. It's pretty hard for Deathrattle to get going in time. Odd Paladin is a really bad matchup, but right now there's no Odd Paladins, but soon I imagine there might be quite a few more once people realize that the deck is actually still very good. And the last one is Even Paladin. Even Paladin does quite well as it is a fairly aggressive deck, even though it has some control elements. But other than that, there's not a whole lot of stuff that does well against Deathrattle Hunter, and it's, again, a much more well-rounded deck this week. Fourth, but again, these 4 decks are very close to one another, basically interchangeable, and after that, it's about a 1% drop in win rate, but there's a large number there even. Speaking of even, the 4th best deck in the game right now, and I know it's top 3, but the first one didn't count, it's Even Shaman. That's right, a lot of you guys have guessed it. Even Shaman has moved up in the ranks. It was one of the best decks before the nerfs, and it was basically unaffected by the nerfs, so of course it's going to move up a few spots, and Even Shaman is a very interesting deck. it plays pretty similarly to Even Paladin. It's a mid-range deck, but it's a mid-range deck that can be played a lot more aggressively. And this week, the highest win rate Even Shamans are tuned a lot more aggressively. So the list that you see there, there might be some new additions that you haven't seen before, but the main one is that Hex is gone. The best Even Shamans in the game right now do not have Hex, and this is like the first time I've seen this. The main replacement is Spellbreaker. So Spellbreaker is a new addition for Even Shaman this week. I know some lists included it here and there, but Hex is gone, basically. That's the new addition. So people are putting in Spellbreaker to still have kind of that taunt throughput, but Spellbreaker is a lot more aggressive than Hex because Hex can only be used reactively. The other new addition is Primal Fin Totem. Primal Fin Totem was a pretty common one of before this week, but now again, with Hex being gone, two of is very common, and it's basically, your 2-drop of choice a lot of the time. You just slam it. You want those proactive plays because there's a void of aggressive decks with Odd Paladin being tuned down. Most decks have already, kind of compensated for that, so, they don't have as many anti-aggro tools anymore. And that's why even Shaman, which is a pretty aggressive deck, this week goes more aggressive and moves up in the ranks. Playing Even Shaman, you just you have to adjust based on what you're playing against. If you're playing against another aggressive deck, you kind of want to play the more mid-range route. You want to play reactively because you can win that way. You can win by just constantly dealing with your opponent's board, playing more of a zoo game. If you're playing against a heavy control deck, you play more aggressively, you take a few more risks, and you can win those games as well. So your decisions will have to vary, but in general, in your mulligan, you're looking for Merkspark Eel, number 1, just to get that kind of hybrid board control plus removal plus push on the board, Flame Tongue Totem to create your win more condition, and Primal Fin Totem for exactly the same reason. Even Shaman is currently the deck with the fewest bad matchups right now. It just doesn't have that many crushing matchups as some of the other decks in the very top. So yeah, okay, there's nothing that actually crushes Even Shaman. There's Mecha'thun Lock. It's 35% for Even Shaman. So yeah, that's bad, fine. But who's playing that deck? And then we have Control Priests, 43, Odd Mage, 44. So there's basically coin flips after that. So there's, if you're playing Even Shaman, you just won't have any bad matchups. But again, you won't have that many super good matchups either. Your good matchups as Even Shaman are, in the low 60s a lot of the time, which is great. It's obviously one of the best decks. And, a lot of people like the game plan where, they always have a chance in the game. No game feels too lopsided. So perhaps Even Shaman is the deck you're looking for. That's it for this week. Hope you guys enjoy the decks. If you want to try them out, all the deck lists are below. You can copy those codes and directly into Hearthstone you go, and we'll have to see what next week has for us, as I imagine it's going to keep changing in this meta.